I see.
We're actually the founding company. Yeah, it's going. We are launching the booklet, right?
Yeah.
The DEI guide.
That's nice. Maybe
Yeah,
I can start
initially we
working with them.
wanted to create a model DEI policy with a set of interventions. However, there was a lot of resistance from companies in Malaysia because the moment you say policy, it's not as flexible. Yeah, so and companies want to retain a bit of flexibility on it, so we changed it to guidelines and interventions as opposed to policy and intervention. Let's see how the market response would be once we launch it.
I think because what we'll do right now, sorry, we're gonna let people in right now because there are like about 25 people that's coming in. So what we'll do is maybe because to start off, maybe I'll just show my face first, and then I think Alister can settle in, and then later on once the panel has started, then we'll bring up everyone. Is that okay? Thank you so much. Okay, Ikin, can you help to unspotlight spotlight? Hello, everyone. Welcome. So sorry for the 1 minute delay. We'll get, because there are still a few people that are going to join. We'll wait for a bit. About like maybe 1 minute to get everyone to join. Then we'll start the session, yeah? If you could, maybe you could actually mute your mic for a bit so that we can have a more productive session on that. Okay. Hold on. All right. Let me check how many participants are in. Okay, I think we can. Okay, I think we are good to start. The rest of our friends can join in a little bit. So maybe I would just like to welcome everyone to our Promoting Diversity, Equity and Inclusion DE&I in ASEAN Workplace webinar. Just to introduce myself, my name is Bernadine and I'm from the Fuller Impact team, your host and moderator for today's session. So before we dive into our discussion, I'd like to take a moment to quickly introduce the organizer, Fuller Impact, and also to go over a few housekeeping rules. Yeah. So at Fuller Impact, our mission is to democratize sustainability, making it accessible to everyone, everywhere. So what we do here is that we envision a future where every business is sustainable, creating impact to people, profit, and planet. And how we do this is through our academy and solutions, where we offer online and on-site capacity building programs and sustainability-related solutions. So if you have any questions regarding our services, feel free to reach out to us on our LinkedIn page or drop us a line on impact@thefulleracademy.com. So throughout today's webinar, what we aim to actually explore are key insights and actionable strategies for promoting DE&I in ASEAN workplaces, as will be shared by our esteemed panelists. So to ensure a smooth session, we have a few housekeeping rules for everyone to take note of. So first, very important one is to keep your microphone muted throughout the session to minimize background noises. And secondly, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A chat on the bottom right of your screen. And then we will address them during the session. And if you have any panelists in mind for your question, you can just mention their name and that will the panelists will address your question. And lastly, the session will be recorded and the recordings will be sent to your registered email after the session for your reference. Yeah, I think that's about it for the rules, housekeeping rules. And once again, thank you for being part of this very, very important conversation. We'll try to make today's session very insightful and impactful together, right? So maybe I can just quickly, get the ball rolling by giving a little bit of context on the topics that we're going to discuss today. And I believe that I think everyone has seen the title of the topic, the webinar. So I believe that DE&I is no longer something that is foreign to everyone here. We hear a lot about like the 30% women on board, fair compensations and stuff like that from the news and from policies makers and stuff like that. So it's in today's ever-changing business environment, embracing DE&I has become a norm and has become a very critical success factor. However, when we talk about DE&I, the common misconception that we have are that DE&I is all about quotas and checkboxes. If you have 30% women on board, if you have this and that. And the second thing is that it only benefits minority groups, or some would say there might be some reverse discrimination to it. And the third one is that it's all the same. DE&I is all the same, and the end goal is just gender and race. And lastly, I think the one of the biggest misconception is also DE&I is only a HR business. Or is it, right? So in contrary to popular belief, DE&I goes beyond that. DE&I is beyond mere compliance and quotas requirements set by policymakers, and he has more potential to that. It's about fostering diversity, leveling the playing field, and also creating equal opportunities for everyone to be able to succeed in their jobs, in their lives, and stuff like that. And while HR plays a very important role in designing and implementing DE&I initiatives, we know that the real change can only happen if there is a cultural shift where everyone takes accountability for DE&I. So studies have shown that embracing DE&I leads to better engagement, decision-making, brand image, and productivity. And companies that prioritize DE&I are said to be better positioned to innovate, attract and retain top talent, and also connect with diverse consumer base. However, from our market observation and feedbacks from the industries, we see that there's still significant challenges that people face in implementing DE&I. People that we talk to, we realize that many organizations and individuals still struggle with understanding on how to address DE&I mandate or even how to start it. Some are even not aware that certain initiatives that they have been implementing for years are already contributing to DE&I, and they just need a little bit of guidance in streamlining these efforts, right? So hence, together with here today, we have our 4 esteemed panelists that has many, many years of experience working in the realm of DE&I to share their insights with us. So firstly, we have Mr. Kishore Ravuri. So Kishore serves as the head of strategy at Dutch Lady Milk Industry Berhad. Additionally, he is also the co-founder of the CEO Action Network and the founder of the DE&I workstream at CAN. His work there involves advocating for organizational justice as the foundation for developing and implementing DE&I principles and policies. Welcome, Kishore.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All right. Next, we have Dr. Sandhya Karpe, who is the CEO of Imagine Education Design Studio and also the Program Director for Asia Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Council at the Conference Board. With over 35 years of cross-cultural experience in human capital development, Dr. Sandhya has also worked with multinational organizations and business leaders across 5 continents and has held key positions at the Duke Corporate Education, the Temasek Management Services Academy, and the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Dr. Sandhya. Oh no, we can't hear you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's great to be here, Berhad.
All right. Okay, next we have Alister, who is the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Lead at Michael Page. He is a recognized leader in the diversity and inclusion realm across the Asia-Pacific region. And his accomplishments include being a recipient of the prestigious Goh Chok Tong Enable Award and NCSS 40 Under 40. He also serves as the vice chairperson of the People Parade and holds board and committee position with Cerebral Palsy Alliance Singapore, Koinonia Inclusion Network, and SA Deaf. Yeah, welcome, Alister.
Hi everyone, Alister here. Good to see all of you. Looking forward to the conversation today.
All right. Last but not least, we have Ms. Shalany Balakrishnan, who is the Vice President of the Strategic Human Capital Management at Khazanah Nasional Berhad. So Shalany is a passionate HR professional with experience across various specialization and industries. So as an engineer by training, she brings unique perspective and strong business acumen to many roles that she is in. Welcome, Shalany. Yes.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All
Looking
right.
forward for a good conversation.
Yes, looking forward to that as well. And welcome and thank you again for accepting our invitation to share on this very, very important topic. So maybe to kick off the conversation, perhaps Kishore, we could start off with you. Maybe you can share a little bit more with us on what is DE&I and what are the key benefits of implementing DE&I initiatives in ASEAN businesses, and how do these initiatives contribute to additional success?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Bernadine. I want to build a little bit on the good context that you previously set, and I strongly believe that the understanding and application of DI principles in Asian or ASEAN context is very narrow and very weak. And I want to support that with some evidence here. Last year, at the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs survey, it highlighted that majority of the 803 companies, which is nearly 79% of those companies which were surveyed, are actually implementing DI programs with a focus on women. And mind you, these companies are from 45 global economies across 25 to 27 industry sectors. And based on my exposure in the Asian space, ASEAN space, some of these companies are actually looking at DEI beyond gender as well. But again, narrowing down the focus only to the D of DEI, which is diversity. Equity and inclusion are then applied in the context of diversity. Is this focus on gender wrong? No, I'm not saying that. It is much needed, especially we all know that at the current pace of change in this space, globally, it would take about 131 years to reach full gender parity. If you look at our own region, East Asia and Pacific, it will take another 189 years to reach full gender parity. So the focus on gender is justified. However, I also believe that we as businesses need to address three key things. One is it's important to elevate the DEI strategy as an overarching strategic framework that seeks to promote organizational justice. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term organizational justice, it is nothing but about fair treatment, non-discrimination, and full participation of the people who matter to us. And secondly, we need to also, as businesses, expand the scope from just our workforce or employees to multiple stakeholders. That is, take a whole of business approach that considers inclusive policies and procedures, inclusive terms of engagement and terms of reference, inclusive supply chains, and inclusive communities that matter to us. And lastly, I think it's also important to understand and apply DEI in the broader context of social sustainability and its application for shaping better business and a better ecosystem. And to address your question about the benefits of DEI, and when somebody asks me about the benefits of sustainability and DEI, these are important questions, but these are very fundamental, and we can't keep going back to the basics. You have produced some evidence before you started this session. We already know that companies employing equal number of men and women employees produce nearly 41% higher revenues. We know women at the top in decision-making roles ensure there is better innovation and businesses are more resilient. I mean, we have ample evidence published, whether it is on gender equity or whether it is a business case for sustainability or DEI. The question really is, how do we bring these benefits closer to business, make it matter to business and the stakeholders within our business ecosystem? And I think before I end, I think I want to introduce this term called drop to the top. Yeah. And what that means is that the degree to which female representation actually drops as seniority level increases in organizations. And there are multiple data points available where for a fact, we know that women's representation drops to 25% in C-suite positions on an average. And there's also a data point that suggests that this trend is more evident in financial services sector next to construction and real estate, as these sectors present the most challenging and toughest conditions for high potential aspiring female leaders. And this is a very real issue, even in large Malaysian companies and even with some of the banks that I worked with. So the point really is that we need to bring the benefits of DEI by identifying specific issues that are relevant to our business, our industry, our country. And that's where your business case becomes much more stronger.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight. And in the context of that, right, making it relevant to the context. Dr. Sandhya, you have done a lot of works and research on DE&I in different regions of the world in the past 35 years. So drawing from that experience in both like the Western and ASEAN context, what lessons can ASEAN businesses learn from the global practices in DE&I management, and how can they adopt or adapt these lessons to suit their specific cultural and organizational contexts?
Thank you. That's a great question. And Kishore, thanks for setting the stage in terms of the lens of the business. And I think that's the lens through which DE&I professionals really need to look at their work and the initiatives that they are pushing forward if they want to garner the right level of support from top management as well as the resources, because this is a resource intensive project. This is not for the faint-hearted who don't want to put their money where their mouth is. So let me come back to the question around the comparative, sort of processes in the West and here. First of all, I think Bernadine mentioned that, the journey of DE&I in ASEAN is at its infancy. And I think while that is a challenge, that's also a huge opportunity. And I think the opportunity really lies in our ability to craft a very unique and a very contextual path forward. So my message to you all would be, don't ape what is happening in the West, because our context here is very, very different. The sad news is that, we are among the most diverse regions in the world in terms of the number of languages spoken, the business context, the culture, the races, the ethnicity, and yet the investment in diversity is so low from an organizational perspective. So our research indicates that ASEAN region has among the lowest investment among companies. Only 16% of companies in this region have any kind of serious investment in DE&I, whether it is roles that are focused on DE&I, whether it is dollar investments that are made in this particular on projects, etc. So the first thing to know is the context is different. The second thing is that the priorities are different. Okay, now I know that when Black Lives Matter happened in the United States, there was a kind of knee-jerk reaction all over the world and said, what is everybody doing about race? The problem is that, the whole story and the genesis of Black Lives Matter is very foreign to the Asian context. And that is why a lot of multinationals who operate in Asia struggled with how do we make sense? How do we translate, that discussion around race? But what that did in a very positive way, it opened, the Pandora's box, and it opened conversations about things that in Asia we typically sweep under the carpet. So it's not like race and ethnicity or ethnic prejudice or racial prejudice does not exist. It's just that we don't talk about it here. So I think there was a lot of positive things that came out of what happened in the US. However, it's important to note that how race and ethnicity manifests itself in the ASEAN region is very, very different than how it manifests itself in the United States, where the story is basically focused much more on, the experience of, African Americans, who are in the United States. So I think, first of all, understand the context is different. Priorities are different. The next thing is, don't paint Asia with one broad brush. It is a very unique and a very diverse region in itself, which means that every country is going to have its own priorities. Whether it is gender in Japan, whether it is color of skin in India, whether it is, Aboriginal interaction or integration in Australia, New Zealand, whether it's LGBTQ in Thailand. And therefore, countries that are operating in those regions need to take a very national, context view of what is happening. And that also means that you will need to create very bespoke solutions which are country specific. And that is, once again, a resource intensive process, because you need people who can speak that language, people who can understand the context, the cultural context, who can connect with the local population and understand what the pain points are. So the problem in the multinationals, Western multinationals today, is all the toolkits and frameworks that are available to the region are Western centric. And it's only being adapted a little bit. But what we need to do here in the region, and that's why companies like you all, which are born out of the region, can create a very, very unique sort of toolkits so I think you are ahead. In terms of priorities, gender continues to be an issue. It was one of the first things that was tackled, but Asia was stuck on gender for a very long time. It's only recently, so I'm not saying the gender nut has been cracked. I think both of you have rightfully mentioned that we still are lagging behind. The COVID has also created a huge setback, and the United Nations talks about the Great She Session, almost like a recession, where the progress that was made in gender parity has set back many, many years because of COVID. So we have to recover from that. However, there are many other priorities that are very, very important, whether it's LGBTQ inclusion, is disability inclusion, it is ethnic inclusion, it is all these other things, right? So there's a lot that we have to work with in Asia, and I think we really need to push forward. And I'll talk later about the whole rollbacks, that's happening in the US right now, where companies are pulling back on D&I. But I think Asia really needs to move forward. There's a lot of work left to be done. Sorry, you can see I'm very passionate about this, and I'm going to stop.
No worries. I really like your point on like how you mentioned that the context is different in ASEAN and compared to the Western world, and that's why we would have different sort of priorities in integrating D&I and stuff like that. So Alister, maybe we can move on to you. I know you have worked with a lot of companies and businesses in the ASEAN region to incorporate D&I. Just to understand a little bit, taking off like what the previous two speakers have shed lights on, like what are the strategies what strategies can business use to leverage on our cultural strength in this context?
Thank you so much for the question. Hi everyone, Alister here. Very happy to see all of you. I will introduce a little bit more about myself as well. I know we can't see over the screen, but I'm actually a person with disability. I use a motorized wheelchair to move around. And so particularly in the area, how can we actually leverage the strengths that we have? And what sort of strategies can we use to create a more inclusive environment? That's a very good question. And I think one of the things is to speak the business language as well, or the language of our management. We do understand that there's a balance between profits and purpose. And it's definitely not profits at all costs, but we still need profits to cover the costs. So everything is important, including purpose and profits. So how do we find that balance? Or even better still, how do we marry both of them together such that it's purposeful, but at the same time there are profits enough to cover the operations and to run as a business and organization as well? Because without profits, then how do we talk about an organization being purposeful, being inclusive, when they need to probably resize or downsize or even close down the organization? So this is really the context first. And so what can we do as a strategy? Firstly, is that we can talk to the people who needs to create buy-in for us when we speak to them. We need to create buy-in with them. And usually those are the upper management or the higher management. And when we approach them, we align and create win-wins with what they are going towards as well. And I like what was mentioned. What are the benefits of being inclusive? Well, let me tell you that it's not just the benefits, but what if we measure the cost as well? Sometimes people ask, how do we factor in the cost when we become inclusive? Let me give you an example. When I'm over here working at MicroPage, being in a motorized wheelchair, you can imagine that when I come and join in the workforce, there needs to be different modifications. For example, when I come in the workplace, now everyone is hot desking. But if I speak so loudly and my computer is on loudspeaker because I can't use my hands to put on the headset, what happens? If I have a meeting, example right now, and it's in the open floor, everyone can hear the whole conversation. And we have hundreds over more people joining this instead of just me here. So what happens is they actually needed to modify a meeting room, convert it to a room for me to take calls and to do my work. That's one example. But it's not just a room. There's a door, and the door needs to push and pull. And I can push the door with the wheelchair, but I can't pull the door. So needing to convert the door to a sliding door that's automatic with a remote control. That's one example. Of course, there are government fundings that we can possibly tap on. But many people think, oh no, then that's quite a hassle, or that's going to be costly. But do we calculate the cost of not including at the same time? What if we don't include? What if we don't have diverse people in the organization, whether it's women, whether it's race, whether it's persons with disabilities? What if we don't have that? Then the cost is also greater, because then everyone would think alike, there's group things and so forth. You know the reasons already. So the strategy is how to speak their language and speak it in a way that aligns with their goals as well. Thank you.
Okay, that's a very nice sharing. Maybe we can move on to like Shalany. I understand that you're someone that has experience working both in the private and also public sector. In your experience, right, how can business actually address unconscious biasness and stereotypes in the workplace, particularly in cultures where, you know, in Asia, collectivism or power distance may contribute to such biasness?
Okay, so to answer this, it's quite a long question. I'd like to break it down a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you look at unconscious bias and stereotypes, as it is, you know, these are things that cannot go away overnight. It is rooted in ourselves, we like it or not, whether we want to admit that we are a biased person or not. We do have elements of that inside. I'll be the first to admit that I'm also very biased in certain circumstances, but you know, it's that always, you know, checking yourself back and asking that question to yourself. And also, you know, it's also aside to ourselves, it's also rooted in processes and systems around us. Whether we analyze it or not, it is there. But, you know, we cannot totally rid bias and stereotypes overnight. It does not happen. Like I said, it's rooted, right? But we can, to a certain extent, try to reduce the impact through the processes and the people that we have in place. So, if you want to say processes, you know, it is then analyzing what we have, what we implement in the company, and you know that, and people is what we do, you know, the trainings or the awareness that we run in the organizations. So before we do any of that, you know, just hopping back to what Dr. Sandhya said, you know, the context in different regions is very different. And when you look at Asia, Asia is like a melting pot. Every country is different. Every state is different. You know, like even in Malaysia, different states have different way of speaking, although, you know, Malay is the national language, but different states have a slightly different slang of speaking. So before we, you know, run something or, you know, try to do something blanket for the organization, really understand and identify the type of collectivism and the level of power distance that, you know, we have in the respective countries or organizations, especially MNCs. When you have offices around the world, it's very different. For example, if you look at Hofstede's insight, when he did the PDI score, Malaysia scored 100. You know, it's like an A+ like that. And then you have most Asian regions which are quite high in their score. Singapore, for example, China, I think they were all 70 and above, as opposed to countries like the UK and US. I think their scores varied about 30 to 40. So you can see that how it changes and how it varies, right? So it's not saying that if you have a high power distance, it's a bad thing. There's always a pros and cons. So really conduct an analysis, I would say, you know, into this collectivism. What type of collectivism is it? Where does it occur? Which groups of employees? How severe it is? You know, is it causing damage to the business? And where does these biases lie? Is it impacting productivity, for example, staff morale? And, you know, is there a way that you can leverage on these pros and cons? So these are detailed I would say, analysis that you can run in an organization, and present the data to your leaders. Alister also mentioned about, presenting this, having the leaders, to chime in. So present this data to your leaders and get them to be on board. So they can understand, especially from a business perspective, whether the unconscious bias and stereotyping is bringing in negative impact to the business. And once you have this data, use that analysis, and I would say customize maybe a training or an awareness session to be relevant to your organization and run it in a way that suits the people best. And when I say customization, it's a big word, but it does not necessarily mean that you need a huge budget. And I think budget is always a constraint because DEI is rather new in the region, and people, how many companies are willing to, invest money? How many companies do have that budget to spend? So don't think of it as a full-fledged training or a huge rara training or anything of that sort, but it could be as simple as a lunch talk, a talk of a lunch, get your leaders on board to talk about unconscious bias. Or you can have, sessions before each meetings where someone speaks, but as long as your sessions are curated to speak about unconscious bias or to speak about stereotyping. So these are low-hanging fruits that you can run, and you would see an impact, maybe not so soon, but it would relate to some of your employees, or at least half of them. And I think another point that Dr. Sandhya brought up, which I also wanted to mention, is not to just take whatever from the Western context and apply it in an Asian context. So that's where I mentioned about customization. I'm not really a fan. I'm not really a fan of picking things off the shelf and just playing it. So it's not really a plug and play thing. Change it a little bit. So if you say like Black Lives Matter to an Asian context, people who are new in DEI, they will just immediately dismiss it and say, "Oh, this has nothing to do with me. So why should I put my time and effort to listen?" So just tweak it a little bit and put it to something more relatable. It touches the heart, and they would really sit and think back. Okay, this applies to me as well. So all these things should not be a checkbox exercise. And that's why it takes a bit more time and effort to really make the changes.
Yeah, I think what you say is absolutely right. We have organization coming to us as well, asking for us asking us on how can we help them in terms of integrating this into their organization. So coming back to your point just now, I like how both you and Dr. Sandhya were pointing out about like customization of I would say initiatives to the local context, right? Maybe Kishore, I can address divert this question to you. You have been working in an MNC, and there's certainly global policies that were set by the headquarters that requires to be adopted to the local context. So considering the rights of, for certain social groups, such as the LGBT population, which may not yet be fully legally protected in many, many ASEAN countries, how can business navigate the legal and social frameworks to ensure inclusivity?
Yeah,
Over to you.
Thank you for that question. And I don't think it is an issue of multinational versus local companies. It is more an issue of whether Asian or ASEAN companies are taking into consideration the critical aspect of religious identity or religious beliefs or religion itself. Yeah, when devising their DEI program strategy and implementation. Last year, again, there was a review of Fortune 100 companies, which demonstrated that there are very small percentage of companies that actually include interfaith engagement or religion or beliefs that are locally seeped into the society. When approaching diversity, and the top 3 companies that really emerged as faith and belief-friendly companies were Accenture, SAP, and Bosch. But otherwise, in Asia, religion-sensitive topics such as LGBTIQA+, which is also evolving as a term, companies often tend to forget that it is not about sexual identity, it is not about sexual orientation or even social acceptance, in my view. but it has everything to do with policies that are non-discriminative, that are fair, that are equitable, to ensure that people in your organization who identify themselves as LGBTIQA+, they have a fair chance, they have fair opportunities for learning and growth in a very non-discriminative environment. And as far as Malaysia is concerned, let's be reminded that yes, there is no specific law or legislation to promote DEI, but equality, and I read equality as non-discrimination as well, is actually guaranteed under the federal constitution as well as by Islamic laws, by the way. So our federal law clearly says that all the persons are equal before the law, entitled to equal protection of the law. So at the least, it is the responsibility of businesses to ensure the LGBTIQA+ people are not harassed, they are not discriminated against on the basis of their identity. And we as organizations are providing an environment that is free of any kind of harassment or discrimination to ensure they continue to be as productive a resource as anybody else.
Okay, that's a good point to that. And maybe, Dr. Sandhya, building on the discussion that we've already had, from many consultations, from our many consultations company, we've seen firsthand on how crucial a company's leadership is in, charting the trajectory. And we've observed challenges where some companies struggle to align their narrative and vision effectively. So in light of this, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on the role of leadership and organizational culture. What do they play in fostering a diverse and inclusive workforce, and how can they promote culture of openness, fairness, and respect for individual uniqueness?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. And I would say the role of senior leaders, the top management, is absolutely critical. And it is one of the key success factors that we have seen in our experience that really makes D&I work. So if that does not exist, it's very often D&I initiatives that are born out of the D&I teams kind of trying to push a boulder uphill, or the HR teams could end up dying on the vine if they are not able to garner the right level of support from their leaders. Now, support can come in a multitude of ways. The most important thing I think everybody has outlined is this requires resources, whether it is people, whether it is financial resources, and whether it is mind share. I think that is really important. And we have seen some of the organizations where this has been hugely successful, where CEOs are personally putting a lot of mind share into this. Now, why is it that they're doing this? They're doing this, let's face it, it's also a little bit motivated by the business, right? And I think that's important to articulate how this translates into good business. And looking at D&I from the lens of the business is very critical in getting your leaders on board. So I think one of the big step up for D&I teams and people leading these initiatives is, how do I articulate the business case? And I think, as Alister said, how do you speak the business speak, not just the D&I speak, right? And there's many benefits, as was articulated earlier, whether it is in terms of employer brand, it is in terms of your employee value proposition, its retention. Our research shows that younger generations are very, very tuned into D&I. They care very much about whether the company, really is people are thriving, whether it's an inclusive workplace. So it is going to affect you in terms of retention, your ability to attract the best talent, and it makes good business sense. So if you can communicate that effectively to your leaders, I think that's the way to get them on board. The second thing I would say is, start with natural champions. Go with the path of least resistance, because in your leadership team, there will be one or two people who are more predisposed to going with this than others. And most of the time, natural champions are born because they have a personal story to tell. Okay, so, and if they have a personal story where they have either been personally impacted or somebody in their family, we know that leaders, for example, I was talking to one CEO who has a child of special needs, so for him, it's a very, very real thing. So if you can really find natural champions who are not just, it's not a business thing, but they're deeply passionate about this, and get them, first of all, to walk the talk. Secondly, to share some narratives, share their personal stories. And that's where, vulnerability becomes important. How many leaders are willing to put themselves out there and share their personal stories? So a lot of companies that are doing work in this area are actually inviting senior leaders to lead these forums and talk openly about mental health issues, about well-being, about their own personal journeys and how they have. So, make leaders real, and that's how they will connect. Let them authentically, share their why this is important to them. So in addition to, it's the right thing to do, it's also good for the business. And I think that's the narrative that we need to really pick up. We also need to see them embracing some of the initiatives themselves, not just talking about them. For example, reverse mentoring. We all know that Asia is, as Shalany mentioned, huge power distance, right? Very hierarchical society. Now, I know a lot of countries have launched reverse mentoring initiatives where they're encouraging younger people who are more tech savvy, who know about sustainability, to mentor leaders who come from a generation that might have missed the whole technology wave. And therefore, technology is not something which is very intuitive to them. And yet they are approving big budgets, which are technology, related projects, etc. So how can we get, this to happen? The biggest barrier to reverse mentoring is the unwillingness of the senior leader to show vulnerability. So that's how you start driving, generational inclusion, where you make your younger people feel that their voices are heard. A lot of companies are doing a great job with this. There's a company in India, for example, that has created a junior board of directors. So a senior board of directors, has some decisions that are made, of course, not the confidential decisions, but those are pressure tested by the junior board of directors, which is high potential young people who are seeing the world from a very different lens. And that is the contemporary world. Sometimes senior leaders have lost touch with what is going on. They may not have evolved with the time. So how can you show vulnerability and make this and include decision-making also an inclusive process? So I think there's a lot of great things that can be done to bring people together. I think the problem when people misunderstandings take place or we don't feel empathetic is because we don't understand the other person. It's not because anybody is a bad person, but we've not had enough exposure, to maybe LGBTQ, to transgenders, and therefore we don't connect with their purpose. So the way to really do this is not necessarily just have formal programs, because those seem very artificial and we actually put people in boxes more than we bring them together. But can you create some organic opportunities for people from different generations, people with different abilities, to come together so they interact socially, they get to know each other. So this is where, leadership really sets the tone, right? It kind of starts at the top.
I like your points on how you could, start from, those that are already sort of converted in that sense, a company's champion, sort of like an influencer in the company. And also how, leaders need to be authentic in terms of championing their purpose and also that reverse mentoring. Maybe we can move on to you, Alister, with your experience in, working with different businesses, right? Maybe you can share some case studies on successful initiative that has already been done in the ASEAN businesses.
Yes, for sure. Happy to do so. So because part of my role in Micropage is to place persons with disabilities into organizations. And I think we had a few recent successful placements as well. One of it is definitely PwC. So we had connected previously, and when we talked to the different ones, especially in the HR, in the talent acquisition space, we were actually figuring out, what are some of the areas that we could possibly find roles that are open to for persons with disabilities. And we look at our pool of candidates as well. Currently, we have about more than 300 persons with disabilities in our database. And we had one that stood out to us. And that particular person has a tax background. However, that individual also went on to do a master's in data analytics. So that individual wanted to find an analytics kind of role. But at the same time, because we're talking to PwC, so the tax role became open. And that's when we needed to actually start to have that conversation. Of course, thankfully, after going through the many interview rounds, the candidate decided to accept the offer also. But that's not all, because then how to not just get a job, but stay in a job. I think that is very important. And because of that, we constantly follow up week after week after week. For the first few weeks, to ensure that the candidate, the individual, is being settled down in the role. So this is just an example of a success stories. There are many more, but I think that's what we can do. It's a conversation, it is a journey, and things takes time as well. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's great what you mentioned just now, like, how you don't just start it, but how can you continue on to, do that integration and slowly integrate DE&I into the organization. Maybe Shalany, understand that you've also worked on launching initiatives in DE&I from ground up in different organizations. Maybe you can share your experience in terms of, success stories in navigating challenges in the implementation of DE&I in organization and also starting them up.
Okay, so thanks for that question. I think that's what people will ask, how is it, before the success stories, there's always challenge, there's always barriers that you have to cross and get off the hoops. So actually the panelists had, in what they shared, have also shared challenges here and there. I've picked up a few that I would also like to emphasize on. So I think the first thing I would say is budget. It's still rather new. Sustainability as a whole is rather new. How many people, how many companies are giving the importance to the social part, because it's all about the E, it's all about the environment, it's, carbon footprint, but how many people and how many organizations are willing to look at that social part? So budget is, I think, one of the biggest constraints for a lot of, especially smaller companies. And also because, again, Asia is so different. Asia is very, very, Asia is like an artwork. It's different in every part. And, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And even in a particular country, organizations are very different. So how many people are willing to put that time to really customize the efforts, to really study the background or, the company's nuances? Also, we do not have as much data as we would like to, because sometimes, when you present your case to the management, there will be people who ask you, where is your empirical papers, your research papers to show that this works? So that is not really something that we can get hold of. That is also some of the challenges that I've had. And it is difficult because it's still new, right? To share success stories, I think one thing that I can share, which probably the listeners can also take away, is especially if it's something that you're starting and you don't know where to start, like what do I actually do, right? One thing that I found was actually, do your people understand what DEI is in the first place? So I realized that, when I speak about DEI, everyone nods their head, but how many of them understand what is diversity, what is equity, and it was inclusion in the first place? So get down to as basic as you can and really break those pieces and, share that with your colleagues, with your employees, run sessions to just to make them understand what is diversity, what are the elements of diversity, get people out of that mindset that diversity is all about race, it's all about gender, because it's more than that. And what is equity and how do we promote equity? So go to really a 101 level and run this kind of sessions. Like I mentioned earlier, you could do a lunch and learn, you could do a sharing before your meetings, just be creative about how you want to run it. And one thing, this is one of the initiatives that I did in Khazanah. And so we did a survey 6 months after running the workshop. And a lot of, I think about 60 to 70% of the employees actually said that they do remember, because, usually when you go for a training or a workshop, 10 minutes later when you walk out, and sometimes you don't remember what happened in that hour. But like 6 months later, 60 to 70% of them said that, okay, they walked out of it being more conscious about how they speak, about how they communicate with people, because the workshop was very, very basic. So nothing too corporate-ish, but also relate what you're sharing to a human side, because DEI at the end of the day is more of a human side. So relate it back to a human sense. That's what I would, yeah. So I think workshops like that, sessions like that actually help. Yes.
I like your point. Like, break it down, keep it simple, keep it basic, keep it relevant. So in that note, right, I think we are sort of running out of time. So before that, we would like to sort of open the question up, open it to the floor for them to ask a little bit of question. I think we have a few questions up. Maybe we'll take about 2 or 3 if time permits. And then if, let's say, if you have more questions, feel free to actually, get in touch with all the speakers or even us, and then we will direct you back to the speakers, all right? So maybe the first question that we can take, I think we have 3 questions here. Right, from Daniel. So he asked, I think this is for everyone, but I think one of you can actually take it. Hi, can the panelists share advice on how we can recruit for D&I without it appearing like we are ticking off boxes, as well as to avoid someone with disabilities to feel like they're only hired to make the company look inclusive? So any takers on this question?
I can help to share and answer that.
Right,
Thank
okay,
you
yes.
so much for the question. Really appreciate it. And I really do agree as well. How can we encourage genuineness and people who really meaningfully want to do it? Well, I need to give a few caveats and a few contexts to this first. So when we talk about an organization or company, we also need to remember and need to be mindful that a company and organization is made up of many different individuals. So it's sometimes a bit hard to broad base and just classify all as part of the organization. So when we talk about an organization, actually we are referring to specific people in the organization rather than the organization as a whole. Let me give you an example. When I was in Singapore Management University, I was doing my bachelor's in economics, and after finishing my first year, and usually there will be summer and there will be internships. And so I received an email one day from the school that says, hey, Deutsche Bank is going to want to do an internship program for persons with disabilities. And I saw that email, and guess what did I do? I immediately closed the email. I didn't even choose to click to apply or so and so forth. Why? It was because I thought that large organizations and corporates that are just so concerned about business and profits that they wouldn't even consider someone like me with a disability. Why are they even doing this? Even if I applied, I most probably will not get it. Of course, that's not the end to the story. People around me and my leaders, mentors encouraged me to still go for apply. And I applied. And guess what? I got into the internship program. And then I realized that, hey, it's hard to broad base or to just paint a brush over the entire organization because there were people in that organization that still cares, that still finds persons with disabilities valuable and worth for the organization. And so, yes, others might not, but then that's the work that we are doing. So it's a broad context that I need to paint first, which is then, so the better way to look at it is how can we convince more people in the company to be more inclusive? Well, if you look at the company as a whole, let's start with those who genuinely cares for it, who genuinely cares about inclusivity. I think that's very important. Then we move to the next stage. There are people who do it as a checkbox, and there are people who don't do at all. So then what's better? Well, I think, I don't know, we don't have the right answer. But my own personal take is, I rather they do, rather than don't do at all. At least if they do, then we can slowly convince them that it's something meaningful and genuine. Take it like this. If you have children, they grow up in the different phases. When they are only 2 years old, you ask them, you have chocolates, can you share? You must probably say no sometimes. But as they grow older, 20 years old, 30 years old, it's weird. If you ask someone, you have chocolates, can you share? And someone says no, they learn how to share. Organizations go through that stage as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alister, for shedding a light on like how this requires, again, organizational shift. So maybe I can take one last question from Shun, from the woman. So maybe Dr. Sandhya, you can take this. She asked, I would like to ask, how can we manage the DE&I backlash and how to persuade privileged groups to understand why equity is important?
Okay, great question. So as I mentioned to you, there's a huge raging debate in the West right now, mostly in the United States, about DE&I, rolling back on DE&I. That is, has DE&I gone too far, right? Has it become, have we crossed the line? You know, are all members of the community feeling included, or are we focusing only on certain segments? So I think the good news is we just did some research on Asian companies, and we have found they have responded that they are not rolling back their D&I initiatives here in the region. Multinational companies, subsidiaries are saying that they have been asked to sort of repackage their D&I initiatives, less in terms of KPIs, more in terms of purpose when it comes to kind of external communication. So there's some adjustments that are being made by multinational company subsidiaries in the region, but by and large, there is a lot of work, unfinished business here to do in Asia. We are not ready to dial back on anything. So the message would be keep powering on in your own way. The good things that have come out of this debate are two that I would, since we don't have a course already charted, you have an opportunity to create it. One is we are being pushed to show greater accountability. Okay, and I think that's a good thing because of this backlash. So which means that, you know, how are you investing in these resources? What is the impact of them? How does it translate into business results? How is it translating into better engagement? So I think we're all being pushed to articulate the business case more, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. We should have been doing it in the first place. And the second thing I would say is beware of creating a cancel culture. Okay, and that means that are certain segments of the community in your effort to serve other segments feeling ignored or feeling neglected? Okay, and I think that's where the root of the debate comes from is, you know, are we serving the whole organization? And I think that's what we need to be aware of and be sensitive to, that there is really a sentiment that, you know, maybe you know, we are addressing certain challenges, but then we are creating other issues that could fester and manifest themselves in other ways, right? So I think getting that balance right, and I think focusing on what we call cognitive diversity, which is basically around why do we need people around the table, as Alister said, from different walks of life, different abilities, different neurodiverse, you know, whatever else, right? Is because they bring different perspectives. And I think if we can start looking at it from that lens, instead of putting people into boxes, why do I need somebody like an Alister on my team? Because, you know, he's gone through a very different journey than I have. And therefore, he sees things in a different way that I might not see. And that enriches the debate, it enriches the conversation, and therefore enriches the outcome. Okay, so I think if we could reframe a little bit to avoid what has happened in the United States, which is that, you know, there has been a little bit of a divisive and a more polarized view on D&I, I think we can learn some good lessons and we can integrate that into our strategies.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhya. That was very insightful. I think one last question. I would maybe, you know, Kishore or maybe Shalany or anyone else in that matter can answer this. This is from Siva, from Eco Business. So so the person's asking, like, do you think Malaysia lacks the political will to ramp up the implementation of D&I in both the public and private sector? Yeah, maybe.
Probably, yeah.
Sure,
Probably I'll take that first. I don't think it's lack of political will, clearly, because if you go back to history, Malaysia was one of the first countries in Asia which sent a women representative to the UN as an ambassador way back in 1970, early 1970. And even when we look at it today, I think the government, there is a lot of political will to look at, or to at least have conversations around what would promote women in highest positions of decision making. So I think what is lacking at the moment is, again, the understanding of DEI, as my panelists also elaborated. Even during the course of our discussion today, we've been looking at inclusion as including let's say, specially able talent, for example. Yeah, I think we need to look at broader understanding. Inclusion is all about fair and full participation of whether you're talking about disadvantaged employees, whether you're talking about specially able talent, we're talking about disadvantaged SMEs in your supply chain. Whoever it is, the people who are important to your business must be given fair and full opportunities for them to participate in decision making, especially in decisions that would affect their relationship with you as a business, that would affect their welfare and their well-being as you grow and make profits as a business. Yeah. So understanding inclusion, understanding diversity and equity from broader perspective will actually strengthen the business case or strengthen the political will or even the will of private and public sector organizations to look at it a bit more closely and apply it in the broader sense of the word, as opposed to narrowing down to specific areas. Yeah, so I think that is my view.
Okay, that's a very good insight there. Maybe Shalany, do you have anything to add on for that?
Yeah, just maybe a quick one. I echo what Kishore said. I think it's the understanding, and that's what I also mentioned earlier. It's really the thorough understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how it actually promotes and actually is a plus point, and you can use it to the best of their advantage. So it's just that understanding, and I think once we cross that bridge, it's not only Malaysia, but I think in Asia in general, once we cross that bridge, the understanding will be better, and it won't be seen as spending money unnecessarily. It will be seen as something, okay, this is worth and this is what we should do because this is the right thing to do.
Yes, and I want to just add one last thing. I think we need to make a culture where differences amongst people or differences do not get turned into disadvantages for people. Yeah. So people come with differences. You need to respect those differences, understand your unconscious bias, and ensure you're not part of the decision-making process if you have a strong bias towards those differences, so that they don't become disadvantages of people who need fair and full, fair opportunities for learning and growth.
Really appreciate all your inputs on this. I think, the time is really not on our side right now. So maybe just one last piece of advice from all of you, just one quick one. How can people get started on DE&I? And, for the rest of the questions, maybe everyone can, just drop us a line on our LinkedIn or, on any of the panelists. But yes, panelists maybe can share a little bit on what's your last piece of advice for people to get started on?
Yes, last piece of advice is don't be afraid, don't be disheartened. Let's continue to be bold, be courageous, and go out there. Have conversations one at a time, start something small. It will eventually grow. I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat as well. Happy to have a conversation with all of you. If you need anything, let's connect. Please feel free to reach out. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Alister. That's beautiful. Maybe Kishore, do you want to go next?
Yeah, my advice would be to broaden the understanding and application of DEI principles in a manner that is meaningful for both business and the people in the business ecosystem.
Okay, that's nice. Maybe Shalany, you want to go next?
Yes. First of all, I think don't rush. Impact takes time. Don't be pressured to do something just to show that something is done. No, that's not how it works. Go at the pace of your organization and look past gender, look past race as an agenda. Look beyond that. Look at untapped talents. There's a lot of underrepresented groups that, are we empowering them enough? So look into those areas as well. And I think the most important thing that I've learned is for every success, give yourself a pat on the back. Even how small it is, give yourself a pat. Yes.
Okay, maybe Dr. Sandhya?
Yeah, I would say focus on inclusion, which means, get everybody to participate, as Kishore said. And secondly, I would say chart your own unique journey. We definitely have learnings from each other, from other regions, but at the end of the day, your organization is unique. The country that you operate in is unique from a cultural perspective. And so integrate all of that into your own story. And finally, one last thing is focus on not putting people in boxes, because we are not just women, we are not just people of a certain color, someone with disabilities. There is an intersection of all these elements that creates a very unique and a different experience, right? So for example, a brown woman living in Japan has a very different experience from somebody else. So try to look at intersectionalities between different elements of D&I and think of the whole person and not the person in a particular silo.
Thank you so much. So if I could conclude that, it will be look within your organization and your context and make things relevant to whatever that organization is doing. Be authentic, break it down, keep it simple, start small, and celebrate small win. Yeah, I think with that, we conclude the webinar for today. But before we conclude, maybe I could flash a quick QR code so that you guys can share with us your feedback on this session, and also let us know what are your topic of interest for the next session. And as a token of our gratitude for joining us today, we're delighted to offer every one of you guys a complimentary course on our e-learning platform, and you can find them after you have completed the survey form. And finally, everyone, maybe you can just snapshot it a little bit. I'll give you about 5 seconds. I guess everyone screenshotting it now. All right. But no worries, we will send an email over, and that's when you get like the complimentary course and everything. And finally, if you could turn on your cameras for a quick photo session to just capture this meaningful session, it will be wonderful. Maybe I could get my team to actually get everyone to open up the camera, to allow everyone to open up the camera. Yep. Are we ready, team? Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Everyone put on your best smile. And then I think my colleague Fenson will help to take a picture of that. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. Smile. Are we good? Okay. Another one. 3, 2, 1. Smile. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You will receive an email later on after this session for all the materials that we have promised, and also how you can connect to the speakers over here. Thank you so much, Dr. Sandhya, Kishore, Shalany, and also Alister. Yes, I think that's all. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.